Hello, everyone, and welcome to this talk. Today, I talk with Pelenakeke Brown within this series of talks in conversation with. Pelenakeke Brown is Afakasi Samoan artist from New Zealand, but recently based in New York. Hello, Pelenakeke, you hear me?
Hi, yeah, nice to be with you.
Yes, thank you. Nice to be with you too. I was just, before this conversation, I was thinking we met the first week of March, and we met in Munich, and it was like a week before this part of the world in Europe also went into lockdown. And after Munich, I went to Novi Sad in Serbia because we were making a new performance with our colleague Natalia Vladisavljevic, a writer and choreographer with Down syndrome. And then we had to stop everything and really in one day decide for myself, where will I go? Because I'm not based anymore in Novi Sad, but in Berlin. So for different reasons, I decided to come back to Berlin and then be here. And I know that you, from Munich, you went to New York and then went to similar process of deciding how to deal with this situation and where to go. And you are now in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this... I'm bringing this up because, of course, as artists working in the field of contemporary dance and performance, we, there is a demand or a norm to move and to travel and to be present in different places because of making our work, which is a problem, I think, on its own. But I don't want us to discuss that problem, but also maybe in this particular moment for most of us, regardless if we are artists or not, space and time as we know it, and also as it is set in a normative way, is very much affected. And I thought I would like to ask you, because I know with your background and also with your artistic interests, you are exploring the concept of Va. And I would like if you can maybe tell us all a bit more about the concept and also later how it is in your artistic practice, because I think it's highly relevant to look into it and understand what it suggests and how it understands the space and time and relation between us as people.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely. Yeah, when you said that we met in Munich, my heart kind of dropped because, yeah, it was like the week after that, the world kind of closed. And yeah, I was in New York for like a week, and then I went to London, and then I came to New Zealand. And a friend called me a time traveler because I went to London from New York where they weren't taking the shutdown seriously. So I went from a very serious situation to a country that was not taking it seriously and kind of watched them go through that process. And I kind of felt a bit crazy because no one that some of the people that I was with weren't thinking about it the same way. And then I went to New Zealand and they were taking it seriously, but their approach is very different and the language that they're using is very different. So yeah, I've been in 3 different contexts and kind of, I feel like I've always been somewhere 2 weeks before coronavirus has hit, which has also been a really strange phenomenon. But yeah, the VAR is a Samoan concept, but it's found all over Oceania. So in Māori culture, it's Wā, in Japanese it's ma, so you can find it in many places. And va means spatial relationships, or the in-between space, like the direct definition of it, but it's much wider than that. The first person who wrote and kind of theorized it was Albert Wendt, and he wrote an essay, I think in 1992 or 1994, and he talked about the va, and he kind of explained it as the unity that is all. He said that it was the in-between space, the space that relates. It's not empty space, so there's always a context to it, there's always a history behind it. And the main thing to think about the va is the relationships that are occurring in the space kind of denote how you relate to someone. So in actual Samoan culture, like in Fa Samoa, which means the Samoan way, the va is always happening. The way that you relate to your parents or your siblings, like we have very formal, or not formal, but very inherent learned ways of being in relationship to people, and in that way showing respect and care. So there's always a reciprocity, and that is always happening in the va too. It's always about you can't just be in the va by yourself, you have to be relating to something else. So in like a social spatial way in the culture, you're showing respect to your parents, or you're showing care and respect to your siblings. So there are lots of different ways, but yeah, it's been most commonly kind of taken up by diasporic Samoans, I think mainly in Aotearoa in New Zealand, and we've now kind of more academics have written about it, and there are different theorists who believe different ways of thinking about the va. So there are people that I think they call themselves va-tas, because they're thinking about time and space. So yeah, it's become a thing that us in the diaspora are kind of creating frameworks, and it's come into government policy. So in Creative New Zealand, which is the creative government department, they actually have policy, and that includes the va, which just came out like last year or the year before. So it's really becoming quite kind of everywhere, I think. But yeah, and so for me, the va kind of grounds my practice, and so whatever kind of topic or question I'm thinking about, because I'm interdisciplinary, so my work is kind of working across drawing, writing, and performing, but I always kind of start in the va, and I'm always thinking about what is the relationships that are occurring, what is the context that is happening, what is the history, what is the in-between, so maybe what is said and unsaid, and kind of all these kind of I was thinking about it before we hopped on the call, that the va is the framework for me, and then kind of thinking about the ways that other people like Albert Wendt and like Albert Rafiti, to people who write about the va, kind of thinking about them and taking those questions and then kind of applying it to my practice. And yeah, so yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't know about this department in New Zealand. That is also it's very interesting, and I think it would be interesting for many other systems to look into this, because I think it would be an interesting an important way to also look into what other systems also have as social care departments, but of course from many experiences we also know that they should be reformed, and I think concepts like this, it's very interesting to then learn and to see how this can be translated into a system that is then part of the government that then creates a system to take care of the citizens. I think it's very interesting, and I think also it makes me think of different experiences and also different theories about this in-between space that in different cultures and philosophy we do have defined as concepts, and also through artistic and other practices as well, even practiced. And I think in this moment is really very important to think how we can make these experiences, these concepts, and these practices more present and visible, and to think, because often as we experience in this crisis with this, what we were talking earlier, like deciding where we will go and where we will stay, the notion of borders and nations again appear as something that actually, in my opinion, and I believe we all experience it, just emphasizes the inequality that we are living and experiencing. And I think in this moment it's very important that we try to think how not to think of these separations, borders, and national focuses, and in terms of security, stability, and everything that is very much present, but to think of looking how to connect with these practices, because listening about what you were describing about the Va and this in-between space and this being that we share and that appears in this in-between space, I think would completely differently also define the reality that we are now experiencing. So in that sense, for me, it's interesting and important to think about it, not only on small scale around us as individual artists or communities in which we make the work, but also maybe to think critically, but also maybe to inspire these also connections and create these in-between spaces with other existing similar examples and practices. I'm just, because you started also to talk about your practice, and something that for me was very strong related to one part of your practice when we saw each other last time, when you talked and presented your work related to using a keyboard as a site where you question what is dance and choreography, but also I see there a very strong also question of movement and freedom of movement and expression, and it's something that is I think also in relation to how we think of choreography more as an expanded practice, and to see what is also happening in this situation in terms of regulations, instructions, executing certain measures, and so on. I think I would like us to talk a little bit about how, through your artistic practice and using a keyboard, how do you think of exactly about these questions, but also a communication and contact, especially in this moment when we cannot be present with our physical bodies, and we cannot connect through touch, and we cannot experience this, what is also inseparable part of the practice as a dance and choreography artist. But it's interesting for me to think of this through this research that you are interested in. Can you a little bit reflect on that?
Yeah, sure. So this kind of practice of making work from the keyboard, just briefly the background, I was asked to write a piece for the Movement Research Performance Journal And I didn't want to write about movement. I felt really tired and kind of, I was just like, how can I talk about moving without talking about movement? Like, how can I extend that? And so, it all kind of started. I was like sitting at my keyboard and I was like noticing the way that I type with one hand, and I was kind of noticing that could be a choreography in itself. And I was kind of noticing the way that I move on the keyboard, and then looking at the keys on my keyboard, enter, return, shift, command, control, and thinking about them as movement terms, and like, what does movement, and I was also thinking about the way that I use technology and the way that I use the internet. So even before COVID, I stayed home all the time, and a lot of disabled people, like, we stay home a lot. And so I'd kind of already carved a world for myself, which is really based around home. And so I use the internet a lot to kind of, in a way, I think, travel. And so I was thinking about meditating on this kind of idea about the keyboard and how it's a way of propelling through time and space, and that got me thinking about the VAR. So I was kind of analyzing the relationships occurring, and then I noticed that there are a lot of marks on the keyboard console that are similar to the marks made in Samoan tattooing, or tatau, T-A-T-A-U, which is where we get the modern word tattoo from. And so this idea of thinking about this ancestral knowledge that was kind of in plain sight was really exciting to me. And then it became this kind of practice that kind of came out of this refusal in a way, or this tiredness, and thinking about the way I communicate. And it made me think about how, as a Crip, I'm in Crip time, so that's in time that's outside of normative, productive, capitalist time. And I was thinking about the keyboard as a way of kind of facilitating that. And so kind of all these things happened, and I've realized more and more that I want to explore work that is at the intersection of many things. So the intersection of disability ideas and also Indigenous Samoan ideas, because growing up, I feel like I put my two identities in two different, I have more identities in that, but I put, disability in one way and Samoan in the other, and I never thought of them as mixing. And that's also happened because a lot of the disabled spaces that I go to are really white, and then a lot of the places that I go to that are for people of color or Samoan people, they're not very disability friendly. So I think in that way that reinforced that those two are not identities that are one and the same, or they can inform each other. And so I think that's become more and more clear as I kind of make work that I think you can be Samoan or Indigenous just as you are. I think a lot of people in the diaspora, we have a lot of anxiety around whether we're enough. And through my research, it always ends up being connected to this ancestral knowledge that I didn't realize I was thinking about. So that's been a reinforcer in a way. And then, finding this idea of Crip time. So for me, and the intersection of the keyboard, you're definitely right. Like, when you bring up this idea of care, like, care is very important in the VAR, and care is really important in Crip time. So, I think the principles or the relationships that kind of are the framework around Crip time is this idea of care between you and your body, between other people. And I think that's very similar to the VAR. So I like to think that they intersect. And there is a Samoan proverb that is Te o le va, which means cherish the va. So I'm also been playing with this of how do you uphold the relationships in the va, or how do you support the disabled body? Like, how can we make spaces? Because sometimes I think that the disabled body, we disrupt time and space. So I'm also, sometimes sometimes I'm talking about the VAR as a very affirming thing, but sometimes I don't know, sometimes cultural spaces aren't always that affirming. So I think I'm trying to make sure, I want to like wrestle with all those nuances. And I think that we're all in the present day, we're all using the keyboard in a way that we never used before. And I feel like people are traveling in ways that they didn't before. They are using the internet to connect. They are using the internet to not go outside, but to be like outside of their like four walls or their houses. So yeah, I think that it's really intriguing to me that we are traveling in this way, but at the same time, we're kind of overloaded by this. We're talking about Zoom fatigue and all these things. So technology is a way that we're communicating, but sometimes it's also showing that there are things that we need that we can't get through technology. So I think that's also coming up. And I think that's interesting to have two things that are like butting up against each other. So yeah, I think that yeah.
I think this what you say about bringing up things that are not coming smoothly together, or that are even, we can talk about them as antagonisms. I think that's an important aspect in what we can do in public, and how we can create these situations also in public sphere, where we can then deal or even solve certain issues, rather than insisting on, how you were saying, like that there is a very smooth cultural space where we should agree and accept it as a norm and be part, and then experience the other one as you were describing, like as it belongs somewhere else. But like to insist on understanding exactly this difference, I think is really, really important, and politically, I think, relevant to bring up, not only through our artistic practices, but in general. But when I hear you saying this, and I was already thinking in March, when we met, like how to support you in this research. And then when I asked you, we talked a little bit like how it can be practically done, like in a studio with other dancers, performers, artists being present. And we somehow were imagining in relation to these norms how the work is being produced in the field of contemporary dance and performance. But of course, it was we were aware that that's not only the way to do it. But I think now in this situation, and also how you are describing it, I'm curious, what are your thoughts in relation to this research interest and this practice that you develop when many of us are experiencing this situation of staying at home, restricted, with restricted mobility and everything that it includes. Like, do you have any thoughts like that within the research can also maybe be done in this phase as one part of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that some of the research can be happening in this time. This is a great time to kind of, if you have capacity to do that reading and kind of maybe do some of the theoretical stuff. Part of the practice, I think, is understanding more about tatau and tattooing, and so part of that would be to get more work, because there is something that happens when you get tatau. But I think that there's something about currently this relationship with technology, like people who aren't Samoan can't be thinking about this relationship with ancestral knowledge. But I think it would be intriguing to me to think about what is your relationship with technology right now. Like, I think that could be a really helpful question to prompt to people, because it's different for so many people, and also depends on your socioeconomic. Some of us are having a great time in pandemic, some of us are like just trying to feed our kids, like it just depends. So I think, what is that relationship to technology, and which I think is going to shift over time, because this kind of this project kind of happened out of a refusal, like out of a prompt and a refusal. And I've just been listening to Tina Campt talk, and she founded a collective, the Refusal Collective. And so she talks about refusal as a space for when it's not serving you. And so through this, refusing, in my mind, it's not a stop, it's like where you become creative. And so I think that kind of happened in that piece of, I didn't want to write about movement in the prescribed normal way, and that opened a whole new way of thinking about movement. So I think that I think that would be an interesting question to think about, this idea of refusal, or this practice of refusal, because I think that we're rejecting a lot of things right now, and hopefully that will lead to change. Like I really hope that we don't just go back and do the same thing. And my relationship with technology will shift one day, because I was typing, but one day I'm going to have to start doing or speech to audio software. So I think that would be interesting to prompt also to Crips or other people to think about, I don't know what it's like to use a screen reader. I don't know what it's like to do that speech to typing dictation software. So I think that would also change the framework or the research behind it. And I think some of those questions are thinking about your relationship to technology, thinking about this refusal as a way to kind of name your own, refuse to be named in a way that has been named before, refuse the systems that we've been doing. And then also, if your relationship to technology isn't through a keyboard, I want to know what that relationship is like and how you think about movement. I think that would be really interesting.
Yes. Yes. It's when you say that you hope we will not come back to the same way, I share this hope. And I also know we are not alone in this, and that's what makes the hope even stronger, or even go out of the notion of hope, like that it is mobilizing, in if I may use this word, for many people. And when I hear this, you are mentioning the crib time and relation with technology, and how people with different ways are also exploring the question of accessibility. So it just makes me think about this, how do we continue? And it makes me think of disability in the context of contemporary dance scene. And I am talking to different colleagues, artists, but also to other curators and other people who have positions in this scene, to like make decisions that their decisions are also, as consequence, become our reality. So I'm trying to talk to a bigger, wider range of people in our field, exactly to point to something that I see as a problem in relation to how disability is present in the contemporary dance scene, because I see it that it's almost like a new trend in contemporary dance, and I think it's important to be aware of this and problematize this, because if I look 20-something years back, there were different trends, let's call them trends. For example, I was also part of one wave of these as being artist who comes from former Yugoslavia, post-socialist context, within this wave of focus on Eastern Europe, for example. And this lasts as any other focus or trend in contemporary dance, but it's also broader, not only specific to dance, like maybe 3 years to maybe 5 years, you know, and then of course it's replaced with another social group identity focus problem and so on that is then obviously related to the cultural policies of mainly we talk now, and I refer to the Western part of the world and concretely also former Western Europe. And this somehow, for me, I see it as a problem, and I think it's important to be aware and learn from other experiences that we have, not to let disability be a topic in contemporary dance, but to insist on structural changes. And this, it brings me back to what you were saying, how we will continue and what to do. And this is something that I would like to ask you, how do you feel if we imagine, or if I ask you to imagine, and I'm happy to join you in this imagining in relation to in relation to crypt time and all of these concepts that are constitutive to your practice. How to think of these structural changes? Maybe to make it also let's imagine, but to make it a bit more maybe concrete, because we will want to meet again. Some of us are also waiting for our postponed performances to take place. Some of us are waiting for residencies to restart after the interruption. Some of us are preparing probably for the next call for applications, and some of us have contracts that are like in the air, defined in the time before the crisis, and maybe even signed or not signed, but in communication with the venues, like to define them. And these are very concrete situations that we are all experiencing. And for me, I am thinking and imagining what we can do with these situations, which I think are also important part of asking for structures to change and to have a different approach. And then, of course, next level would be even more in this direction that I say, like, that disability is not a topic within the contemporary dance, but that it is an obvious structural change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like if we're speculating, if we could just pull the whole system down and start again, I think that would be like good, because yeah, when you're talking about all these things like open calls and contracts, like that kind of fills me with anxiety. And I feel like if we go back to all of that, there's no way that we can really change the system. But I feel like I think I'm going to jump between like practical and like speculative. And I feel like in a practical way, like institutions, they should honor their commitments to artists regardless whether the production can go through, because when you first get the job, you start thinking about stuff. Like, I think that's the thing about being an artist. Like, people think you don't have a real job, but I think it's because you're always thinking, and like there's part of your brain that's like making these connections. And when you're on the train, like you're doing work when you're not necessarily like sitting at a desk. And so I think to like honor that, and also kind of honor the anxiety and that's occurring, especially because artists, we kind of go from contract to contract or gig to gig, and many governments have shown that that we're kind of falling through the cracks. And then this thing about red tape and everything, if we like tore the whole system down, I'd like us to kind of invest in artists and not think about these timelines, which again are normally based around funding timelines. Like, if we invested in artists, and I think if we gave them the right infrastructure and paid them enough so that they don't have to worry about going from job to job or having a part-time job, that that changes everything. Last year I had a residency, but I was so exhausted just traveling there because the commute was really exhausting. So I felt like I had all of this support and money, but I could like barely make dinner when I got home. And so, if we thought about like all the things that you need to make an artwork, that would include like, maybe you need, it shifted things for me. Like, I was like, oh, maybe I should apply for residencies that are on campus, that I don't have to do this traveling. So again, I'm making the accommodations, not the institution. If we invested in artists and weren't making them, make the bare minimum. And I agree I think that our response to coronavirus is showing so many things. And it's also, regardless of country, like every country is closing their borders and becoming super nationalistic. We talked about it briefly. And so, you have to choose, like, where am I going to go home? Like, is it the place that I have health insurance? Is it the place that I have citizenship? Is it the place that I've lived for the last 6 years? Like, these kind of questions. And I feel like, I have a lot of anxiety for my friends who are in New York, who are immigrants but aren't citizens or permanent residents. So we're not receiving a lot of the government stimulus packages, and the same in New Zealand. Like, if you were on a work visa and you were outside of the country but you live in New Zealand, you cannot return. So I think that, I don't know, if in a perfect world, if we invested in people and something, I don't know how to, that's like too big of a question to kind of grapple with. But the thing I can offer is, there was another Pacific theorist called Epeli Hau'ofa, and he wrote an essay called The Sea of Islands. And he talked about how when the Pacific was colonized, they called us a sea of, a big vast sea with this small group of islands. But he was like, if you switched it and you thought about the sea as a pathway and not a border, we become this vast sea of islands. So we're not these like tiny countries. And so I think I want to, like, this is like, the big speculative, like romantic, something about thinking about these borders or these pathways or the ocean as a way of connecting. Because even through the internet we are connecting, but that's only if you have a good Wi-Fi connection. So again, there's like a class privilege there. If you don't have that, then how do you get to learn school? You have to go to school even though you're meant to stay home, So I think that there's something about connecting, and I don't know how to express it more without just the metaphor of what Epeli is saying is also switching the way that the colonizer or the other or the institution or the government has made a decision of how we categorize ourselves, of how we organize ourselves. If we did it to the way that actually made sense, I think that would change what happens. Yes.
Thank you for this metaphor and for this thoughts, because I also feel that there is a lot of unlearning that we should do, and really let ourselves go into this process. And in this, I think the first thing when you said like that, we just take down the whole system as like a kind of let's say the most radical way, and I understand this, but I also know that these images and these states also scare many people, because we are also out of the in the history and out of the experience that we all have. This creates a lot of fear in people, and for me in this moment, and even in speculating about the change, for me it is so important also not to do things that would just continue producing more fear. Yeah. And it is when I say that we need to give up on already existing contracts and orders, and that we also need to unlearn what we think that this is the way how we should create a program of an institution, or that this is how we should ask for support as being an artist. I think this is now already happening, and for me it is my desire to see how to bring this also a bit further, that it has very concrete material consequences on the relations and on how the scene is structured, and that exactly this hope that you are saying that we hopefully continue, somehow I also feel like it's important to think that we are already continuing, like that we are not somehow I think it's important to think also that we are not now waiting to be told when we are allowed to be again back artists and citizens in public and without restrictions to move and express and act and use resources and so on. So in that sense, this also are the thoughts that I am occupied with in this time, and to see how this how to think of this already as a transition, and to think of it how we can also take care that this transition also is a period in which we are also as much as possible having it in our hands, at least if we are talking about this context of contemporary performing arts, where we are as workers and as citizens present.
Yeah, but I also don't want us to act too fast, like, you know, to not take this time to learn what could be possible. I think, you know, I'm worried of this kind of knee-jerk reaction of just responding to what's currently happening without taking a time to take stock and to realize.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, and I would say that it's somehow I'm interested, and what excites me is that we can also include all these positions, which also is including different contexts, different backgrounds, and different motivations that we have, but that are addressing the same issue, or that we are sharing the same or similar concern about us as artists, as workers, as citizens.
Yeah.
But Talking about the change, there is something I would like now, maybe in this moment of our conversation, to bring up. You know that I ask each artist about a question for the next one. And last week I spoke with Per.L. From New York, artist, and they have a question or three questions. Let me just remind myself. The question Per.L. asked is, what is your guilty pleasure right now? Do you think we could start a revolution through our guilty pleasures? And if we could, what would it look like? Speaking about the change and speculating this change, like.
Oh my gosh, I love that. What is my guilty pleasure? I think my guilty pleasure is reality TV. I really love reality TV. So I just finished Too Hot to Handle on Netflix. It's super trashy. It's like the chaste version of Love Island, which I also deeply, deeply love. And now I'm watching The Amazing Race, which isn't as racy. But yeah, I think that really bad reality TV show is my guilty pleasure. And then the next question is about how the revolution.
If you think that we could start a revolution with our guilty pleasures.
Yes. How? I mean, the first thing I think of is guilty pleasures. I find like fully absorbing. If I'm not fully absorbed in it, then it's not trashy enough, or it's not good enough. I just, So, there's something about this. I don't know. Is it a way of resting? Is it a way of putting my mind at rest? Is it? I don't know. Is it watching people make bad decisions and judging them? And I don't know, is there like some kind of moral compass happening while I'm like watching this like terrible sector of our humanity? So is it a way of like rechecking my priorities or what I would do in a situation? So, maybe that's is it like training my moral compass to make decisions in trashy, heightened things? I don't know. That would help the revolution, or like where I stand. Or is it like a way of taking care? Or sometimes you just look at it and you're like, this is so terrible. And I think maybe there could be like, I don't know, an anger that came out of like really bad. I mean, this isn't trashy, but I've been watching RuPaul's Drag Race, and my favorite drag queen, Heidi, she talked about how she made $9,000 last year, and then she wins one of the challenges and she gets $5,000, and she's like, I did have 33 cents on my account, and now I have 5,033 cents. So and a lot of the time, if you're a queen who doesn't have access to wealth, it's quite hard to my reading, it's quite hard to go through and get further up the top, because you need that access to money to like look the way that they want you to look. So I think there's always class dynamics and race dynamics and wealth dynamics that are kind of happening, especially on that show, which that you could apply to the revolution or justify the revolution. Everyone should be a drag queen who could win RuPaul's Drag Race because she has access to all the money. Yeah.
I mean, these questions also that Per.L. asked are they were like, first, as you reacted, like they were like, I laughed, like they came as a surprise and like funny but serious, but it makes you then really think. And somehow, for me, they really have to do with how we relate to norms and how we this state that, as you said, like this kind of to being absorbed and excited and committed to this experience and examining this case is the state that is the one, because Perel asked about revolution, like is a state that moves one to act towards bending norms and or breaking norms or rethinking them, and this is like how these questions resonate with me, and it's exciting to think of these also other means that we would use to bring a change, because it would be a different way from what we talked a few minutes ago excuse me, few minutes ago when we talked about how the dance world is structured and how we can do it in relation to these procedures that we know. But like to just imagine to bring a change through this other way, it's exciting also and relevant.
Yeah. On that point, I'm also watching The Amazing Race, which is terrible because it makes people exert their bodies. Like somebody got disqualified the other day because he fell off a camel and broke some ribs, and that, you know, and so I'm watching that and also thinking about my politics around disability and the body, and I'm watching it. So yeah, when you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, that makes me think of The Amazing Race and how they kind of exert everyone. And then I'm thinking about, like, I don't know, the democratic nature of reality TV. Like we all I think a lot of people watch reality TV, and it's like a I don't know, a baseline of culture or something. And it makes me think of TikTok, like, you know, TikTok as being a place where everyone is using right now to like move, to kind of prove they're alive, to kind of watch funny videos. And earlier when I was thinking about talking with you, I was thinking about technology and had thought about TikTok as a, you know, and again, is that a way of democratizing dance? Like, you know, there are all these choreographed dances, then everyone does them and posts them. And so I don't know, I think there's something really beautiful that's happening on TikTok, and there's a song where people have been lip syncing it, and they're coming out, and so you're kind of seeing all these people come out. And I was listening to This American Life, and TikTok is a way that a lot of people who are in countries that they can't. There was a story about this guy was looking for his family, and he is able to watch TikTok. That's the only way that he might see a glimpse of his family. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think reality TV and TikTok, that it's all kind of part of it, and it's all, important.
Yeah. It's interesting. But I would also like to ask you for a question for the next one that I will talk with. Do you?
Yeah, I totally forgot about this homework. So I'll just have a this was a question that Tina Kemp, she gave a workshop to the residency that I'm in at the moment, IBEAM, and she posed it to us, and I really liked it. So I think she asked us, what does refusal mean to you? So I think that, that would be the question I think I ask. But it's not as good as Perel's.
No, I think all questions are good. So what does refusal mean to you?
Yeah, or what are you refusing right now?
Okay, so what are you refusing right now, and what does refusal mean to you? Well, with these questions, I would also like to leave them for everyone who is watching and listening to us, and slowly finish this conversation today. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining me and being part of this series of talks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we keep in touch and we continue thinking about these questions and these topics.
Totally. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.